My name is Amanda, and I am 25 years old. I never thought my own family could hurt me so deeply. Growing up in our suburban home, everything seemed normal from the outside. Then came that terrible night when my sister Brooke broke my rib during a violent argument. The sickening crack, the blinding pain. But nothing hurt worse than what happened next. My mother snatched my phone away as I tried to call for help, laughing as she said, "Don't call the cops, it is just a rib. You will ruin her future." My father called me a drama queen while I struggled to breathe. They had no idea what I would do next. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Colorado Springs. Our two-story brick house with its perfectly manicured lawn looked like the perfect American dream. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect family. My father, Michael, worked as an investment banker, always dressed in crisp suits and driving a luxury sedan. My mother, Diana, was the quintessential homemaker who volunteered at every school function and hosted the neighborhood barbecues every summer. My sister Brooke was 2 years younger than me, but somehow always seemed to be miles ahead. To understand what happened that night when my rib cracked beneath her hands, you need to understand our family dynamic. Brooke was the golden child from day one. By elementary school, she was breaking track records and bringing home straight A's. My parents beamed at every award ceremony, their faces glowing with pride as she collected trophy after trophy. My mother would introduce her as our star athlete, and my father would brag about her brilliant future to anyone who would listen. Then there was me. I was the artistic one. I loved drawing, painting, and designing. Hours would disappear as I created in my sketchbook or worked on my digital art. But in our household, these were merely impractical hobbies. My mother would sigh whenever she found me working on a new piece. "Amanda, do not waste your time on things that will not get you anywhere." My father was more direct. "Art does not pay bills, Amanda. You should focus on something useful like your sister." The physical intimidation started early. When Brooke was 6 and I was 8, she pushed me down the stairs because I had borrowed her colored pencils. I broke my wrist that day. My parents took me to the emergency room, of course, but the conversation on the way home was all about how girls will fight and how I should have asked permission before touching her things. My broken wrist was somehow my fault. By the time I was 12, Brooke had developed a pattern. If I achieved anything, she would find a way to sabotage it. When my art teacher entered my painting in a local competition and it won first place, I came home to find the certificate torn to shreds on my bed. When I confronted Brooke, she pushed me so hard against my desk that I had a bruise for weeks. When I showed my mother, she just said, "Your sister is very competitive. You need to stop provoking her." The worst incident before the rib breaking happened when I was 16. I had saved up for months to buy a new camera. Photography had become my passion, and I was so proud of my purchase. 3 days after bringing it home, I found it at the bottom of our swimming pool. Brooke claimed it fell when she was taking a selfie. That night, I finally stood up to her, screaming that I knew she did it on purpose. She grabbed me by the hair and slammed my head against the wall. When my parents came running, they separated us and then lectured me about making accusations and starting fights. Years of this treatment changed me. I became quieter, more withdrawn. I learned to take up less space, to keep my achievements to myself, to hide my artwork in my closet instead of displaying it. I developed anxiety that would knot my stomach whenever Brooke entered a room. I flinched at sudden movements. I became an expert at conflict avoidance, always agreeing, always appeasing, always backing down. "Just let it go," Amanda, became my mantra. "It is not worth the fight." And for a long time, I believed that. I thought if I made myself smaller, the attacks would stop. I was wrong. Making myself smaller just made me an easier target. I returned home for Christmas break after my college graduation with a mixture of hope and dread churning in my stomach. 4 years away at art school in California had given me some perspective. Distance had made me stronger, and I hoped that maybe things had changed at home too. People grow up, right? Relationships evolve. At least, that is what I told myself as I drove up our snow-covered driveway. The house looked like something from a holiday card. Christmas lights twinkled along the roof, a wreath adorned the front door, and through the windows, I could see our 12-foot tree sparkling in the living room. Everything was physically beautiful and emotionally cold, just as I remembered. Brooke had just been accepted to a prestigious law school in New York. The entire house had been transformed into a shrine celebrating her accomplishment. Future lawyer banners hung in the kitchen. Congratulatory cards lined the mantel. My parents were planning an elaborate dinner party to announce her acceptance to all their friends and family. My own news, a job offer from a respected graphic design firm in Denver, was acknowledged with a distracted, "That is nice, dear," from my mother, while she typed out invitations to Brooke's celebration. My father asked if it paid enough to live on and then immediately changed the subject to Brooke's scholarship prospects. It was as if my achievement existed in a vacuum unworthy of recognition, while Brooke's success needed to be broadcast to the entire world. The first incident happened less than 24 hours after my arrival. I had parked my car, a used Honda I had saved for 2 years, to buy in the left side of the garage. The next morning it was gone. Brooke had taken it, without asking to meet her friends for breakfast. When she returned 3 hours later, there was a new scratch along the passenger door. "What happened to my car?" I asked, running my fingers along the jagged scratch. Brooke tossed my keys onto the counter with a shrug. "Some idiot in the parking lot. Not my fault." "You could have asked before taking it," I said, my voice tight but controlled. "God, Amanda, it is not like you were using it," she rolled her eyes. "Do not be so possessive." My mother, overhearing from the kitchen, chimed in. "Share with your sister Amanda. She needed a car this morning." The message was clear as always. My boundaries did not matter. My belongings were not truly mine. My feelings were inconvenient. The next day, I returned from a walk to find my bedroom had been reorganized. My mother had taken it upon herself to move my furniture, rearrange my closet, and put away my art supplies that I had left on my desk. "I tidied up for you," she said brightly. "Your room was a mess." It was not. It was organized exactly how I liked it, with my current projects accessible and my supplies arranged by type and color. Now everything was crammed into drawers, my careful system destroyed. "I had a system," I said, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. "I knew where everything was." "Well, now it is properly organized," she replied, as if my system could not possibly be valid. "You should thank me." That evening, I discovered that the framed artwork I had brought home, pieces I had created during my senior year, had been removed from the family room walls to make space for more of Brooke's trophies and certificates. "Where are my art pieces?" I asked my father, who was watching television. "Your mother needed the space for the party," he said without looking away from the screen. "They are in the storage closet." "Those were important to me," I said. "They were part of my portfolio." "You can put them back up after the party," he said dismissively. "It is just for a few days." But I knew they would never go back up. They never did. The next affront came when Brooke wore my new sweater, a soft cream cashmere that I had splurged on as a graduation gift to myself. She not only took it without asking, but returned it with a coffee stain down the front. "Oops," she said, tossing it onto my bed. "Might want to wash that." When I pointed out that cashmere needed special cleaning, she laughed. "Then you probably should not have left it where I could find it." It had been in my suitcase. She had gone through my things deliberately. That night, I overheard my parents discussing finances in their bedroom. Their door was ajar, and I froze in the hallway when I heard my name. "Amanda asked if we could help with her student loans," my mother was saying. "I told her we are stretched too thin right now." "Good," my father replied. "She chose that expensive art school despite our advice. She can handle the consequences." "We will need to increase Brooke's allowance for New York, though," my mother continued. "Living costs are so much higher there." "Of course," my father agreed. "Whatever she needs. This is an investment in her future." I stood there, my chest tight with hurt. I had worked part-time jobs throughout college, applied for every scholarship I could find, and taken on loans for the remainder. I had never asked them for money until now, when the interest was becoming overwhelming. Yet Brooke, who had received full tuition to her undergraduate program, was being handed whatever she needed for law school without question. The final trigger came the day before the big fight. I returned to my room after a shower to find Brooke sitting on my bed reading my private journal. My heart stopped. That journal contained everything, all my true feelings about my family, my experiences, my pain. "What are you doing?" I gasped, lunging forward to grab it from her hands. She held it away, laughing. "Just catching up on your life. Not that there is much to catch up on. God, you are boring." That is private, I said, finally wrenching it from her grasp. You had no right. Calm down, she said, standing up with that familiar smirk. It is not like your life is interesting enough to read about anyway. As she sauntered out of my room, something inside me shifted. A lifetime of backing down, of letting things go, of making myself smaller, suddenly felt unbearable. The constant invasion of my space, my privacy, my selfhood had reached a breaking point. For once, I was not going to let this go. The next morning, I confronted Brooke in her bedroom. She was at her vanity applying makeup for her celebration dinner that evening. Our eyes met in the mirror as I entered, without knocking, a deliberate choice to show her how violation of privacy felt. We need to talk about you reading my journal, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Brooke rolled her eyes and continued applying mascara. Are you still upset about that? It was just a peek. It was not just a peek. You violated my privacy. I stepped further into her room, noticing how she stiffened slightly. I rarely entered her space uninvited. How would you feel if I read your private thoughts? She snorted. As if I would keep a diary. That is such a childish habit. It is not childish to process your feelings through writing, I replied. But going through someone else's things definitely is. She finally turned to face me, her expression hardening. What do you want, Amanda? An apology, fine. Sorry I read your boring little thoughts about your boring little life. The dismissive tone, the belittling words, the complete lack of genuine remorse. It was so familiar, but this time it ignited something in me, rather than shutting me down. I want you to respect my boundaries, I said, my voice rising slightly. I want you to stop taking my things without asking. I want you to stop treating me like I am nothing. Brooke stood up, crossing her arms. God, you are so dramatic. This is why nobody takes you seriously. No, I said, stepping closer. This is why I never stand up for myself. Because whenever I do, you and Mom and Dad twist it around to make me the problem. She laughed, a sharp cutting sound. Maybe you are the problem. Did you ever think about that? Always whining, always so sensitive, always so jealous of me. Jealous. The word struck me like a slap. Why would I be jealous of someone who has to put others down to feel good about herself? Her face flushed. I had never spoken to her like this before. She was not used to me fighting back. Get out of my room, she said, her voice dangerously low. No, I replied. Not until you promise to stay out of my things and respect my privacy. She moved toward me then, her body language shifting from defensive to aggressive. I said, get out. As she approached, I instinctively stepped back into the hallway. But I did not retreat fully. This was the pattern after all. She would push, I would back down, but not this time. This has to stop, Brooke, I said as we stood in the hallway. The way you treat me, the way you always have. I am done being your punching bag. Oh, please, she scoffed. You are not a victim, Amanda. You are just pathetic. I am not pathetic for having boundaries, I said, standing my ground. What is pathetic is needing to hurt your sister to feel powerful. That was when she shoved me hard, both hands connecting with my shoulders and sending me backward against the wall. The familiar impact, the familiar spike of fear, but instead of cowering, I pushed back. Do not touch me, I said, giving her a light push away from me. Her eyes widened in shock. I had never pushed back before, literally or figuratively. For a moment, she seemed genuinely surprised that I would dare defend myself. Then something changed in her expression. A flash of pure rage that I had never seen before, even from her. She lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders and shoving me with all her strength. I stumbled backward off balance, and the next thing I knew, I was falling. But it was not a clean fall. My side connected with the corner of an antique wooden chest that stood in the hallway. A sickening crack echoed through my body as unimaginable pain exploded through my ribcage. I crumpled to the floor, gasping, unable to catch my breath. The pain was like nothing I had ever experienced. Sharp stabbing, all-encompassing. Every breath was agony. I curled into myself, one hand clutching my side, feeling something wet. When I looked at my fingers, they were red with blood. The corner of the chest had not only broken my rib, but broken the skin as well. Amanda Brooke's voice sounded distant, tinged with something that might have been concern or might have been fear for herself. Get up. Stop exaggerating. I could not speak. Could not respond. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as I struggled to breathe through the pain. Each shallow gasp sent new waves of agony through my body. "What is going on up there?" My mother's voice called from downstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps rushing up the stairs. My parents appeared at the end of the hallway, taking in the scene, me on the floor, clutching my side, Brooke standing over me with a confused expression. "What happened?" my father demanded. "She attacked me," Brooke said immediately, her voice trembling with fake emotion. I was defending myself. "She pushed me into the chest," I managed to gasp, reaching for my phone in my pocket. "I need a doctor. I think my rib is broken." I fumbled with the phone, trying to dial with shaking fingers, struggling to stay conscious through the waves of pain. My mother rushed forward, but not to help me. Instead, she snatched the phone from my hand. "What are you doing?" "Calling 911, I wheezed. "I need help." "Do not be ridiculous," my mother said, her voice cold despite the smile fixed on her face. "You will ruin your sister's future. Law schools do not accept students with assault charges." "Assault charges?" I stared at her in disbelief. "She broke my rib." "Always the drama queen," my father sighed, shaking his head. "Just put some ice on it. You probably just bruised yourself." Brooke stood behind them, her initial shock giving way to self-preservation. She came at me first. I was just defending myself. I looked from face to face, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, and saw nothing but dismissal and annoyance. My sister had physically injured me to the point of bleeding, and they were concerned about her law school prospects. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment it overshadowed even the physical pain radiating through my body. "I need my phone," I said, reaching toward my mother. "Please." "You will not call anyone," she said, firmly pocketing my phone. "This is a family matter, and we will handle it as a family." By ignoring it, I asked, tears streaming down my face now from pain and betrayal both. "By not overreacting," my father corrected. "Now get up and stop making a scene. Your sister has her celebration dinner tonight." They were more concerned about a dinner party than the fact that I was injured and bleeding on the floor. In that moment, I realized no one was going to help me. I was completely alone. Somehow, I managed to pull myself up using the wall for support and stagger to my bedroom. Each step was excruciating, each breath shallow and painful. I closed my door behind me and collapsed onto my bed, curling onto my uninjured side as tears streamed down my face. The physical pain was overwhelming, but the emotional pain cut even deeper. My own family had abandoned me when I needed them most. Not just abandoned me, but actively prevented me from getting help. After about 20 minutes of lying completely still, trying to find a position that did not send stabbing pain through my side, I carefully pulled up my shirt to examine the damage. An angry red and purple bruise was already blooming across my right side, with a small but deep cut where the corner of the chest had broken the skin. The area was swollen and so tender that even the lightest touch made me gasp. I grabbed my laptop and, through a haze of pain, searched for broken rib symptoms. Everything matched intense pain, especially when breathing or moving, bruising, swelling, and the distinct crack I had heard upon impact. According to the medical websites, most broken ribs healed on their own with rest, but complications could include punctured lungs or damaged internal organs. What if I had a punctured lung? What if I was bleeding internally? No one in this house would know or care until it was too late. I created a makeshift ice pack by wrapping ice cubes from my mini fridge in a towel and gingerly held it against my side. I found some leftover prescription pain medication from a dental procedure and took it, hoping it would take the edge off. Then I lay perfectly still, focusing on taking small, shallow breaths that caused the least amount of pain. Through the air vent near my bed, I could hear my family talking downstairs. Their voices drifted up, clearly unaware that I could hear every word. "Do you think she will tell anyone?" My mother's voice concerned, but not about my well-being. "Who would she tell?" My father responded dismissively. "What if she goes to the hospital?" Brooke's voice tinged with fear. "What if they report it?" "She will not," my mother assured her. "She knows better than to make trouble. Besides, Amanda always exaggerates. I doubt it is even broken." "She attacked me first," Brooke insisted, her voice rising slightly. I was defending myself. "We know, sweetie," my father soothed. Amanda has always been jealous of you. She probably planned this to ruin your celebration. I closed my eyes, fresh tears leaking out. I had not attacked Brooke. I had barely pushed her away after she shoved me first. But the narrative was already being rewritten with me, as the villain and Brooke as the victim. It was a story as old as our relationship, but never before had the stakes been so high. About an hour later, there was a soft knock at my door. I did not answer, but my mother entered anyway. Another boundary crossed without thought. "Amanda," she said, her voice falsely bright, "are you feeling better?" I did not respond, did not open my eyes. She sighed and sat on the edge of my bed, causing me to wince as the movement jostled my injured side. "We need to talk about what happened." "You mean when Brooke broke my rib and you refused to let me get medical help?" My voice was raspy with pain. "Do not be dramatic," she said sharply. "If it was really broken, you would not be able to talk to me right now." "That is not true," I said. I looked it up. Broken ribs are extremely painful, but they do not prevent speech. She waved her hand dismissively. "The internet exaggerates everything. Listen, what is important now is that we move past this as a family. Brooke is very upset." "Brooke is upset." I opened my eyes to stare at her incredulously. "I am the one with a broken rib." "Lower your voice," she hissed. "Your father and I have decided that we will have a family meeting in the morning to resolve this. Until then, I suggest you rest and think about how your actions contributed to this situation." My actions, I could not believe what I was hearing. I confronted her about reading my private journal. She pushed me into a piece of furniture hard enough to break my rib. "How are those equivalent?" "There are always two sides to every story," she said, standing up. "We will discuss it tomorrow. Oh, and here is your phone back." She placed it on my nightstand. "I trust you will make the right decision about using it." The threat was clear. If I called for help, there would be consequences. As she left, she added, "We are still having Brooke's celebration dinner tonight. I have told everyone you are not feeling well." Not feeling well, like I had a headache or a cold, not a broken bone and potentially serious injury. The next morning, I was woken by my father, knocking loudly on my door. "Family meeting in the kitchen in 15 minutes, he called. "Be there." It took me nearly all 15 minutes to get out of bed, change my shirt, and make my way downstairs. The pain was, if anything, worse than the day before. The bruising had darkened and spread, and every movement sent spikes of agony through my body. When I finally made it to the kitchen, they were all sitting at the table, waiting, my father at the head, my mother beside him, and Brooke across from her, looking sullen but composed. "Sit down, Amanda," my father instructed, pointing to the empty chair beside Brooke. I lowered myself carefully into the chair, staying as far from my sister as possible. "Now," my father began, his hands clasped in front of him, "we need to put yesterday's unfortunate incident behind us. Brooke has something she would like to say." Brooke turned to me, her expression, a perfect mask of contrition that did not reach her eyes. "I am sorry you got hurt when you came at me," she said. "I did not mean for you to fall into the chest. Not I am sorry I pushed you. Not I am sorry I broke your rib. But I am sorry you got hurt when you came at me," shifting the blame to me even in her apology. "Amanda," my father prompted, "do you have something to say to your sister?" "Are you serious?" I asked, wincing as the words caused my rib to shift painfully. "You want me to apologize to her?" "Your reaction to finding Brooke reading your journal was excessive," my mother said. "You escalated the situation." "I asked her to respect my privacy," I said through gritted teeth. "That is not excessive." "The important thing," my father cut in, "is that we move past this as a family. Brooke has her law school orientation in 3 weeks. We need to focus on that now." "And what about my injury?" I asked. "Do I just pretend that did not happen?" "Take some ibuprofen," my mother suggested. "It will be fine in a few days." "And Amanda," my father added, his tone growing stern, "I hope you understand that certain actions would have serious consequences for everyone. Not just for Brooke, but for you too. Remember who pays your health insurance. Who co-signed your student loans." The threat was unmistakable. If I sought medical help, if I told anyone what really happened, they would cut me off financially. With my substantial student debt and entry-level job prospects, that would be devastating. My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. We just want what is best for both our girls. This little incident does not need to go any further than this room. Little incident. A broken rib was a little incident. My sister's violence was a little incident. My pain and fear were little incidents. Now, my father said, clapping his hands together, let us put this behind us. Brooke, do not you have brunch with your friends today? And just like that, the family meeting was over. No resolution, no acknowledgement of the seriousness of what had happened, no concern for my well-being, just a thinly veiled threat and a dismissal. As they dispersed, I remained sitting at the table, a terrible clarity washing over me. In that moment, I understood I was completely alone in a house full of people who should have loved me, people who should have protected me, people who should have been outraged that I was injured, not worried about covering it up. That night, as I lay in bed, alternating between applying ice to my injury and researching broken ribs on my laptop, I made a decision. I expanded my search to include housing options in Denver domestic violence resources and the legal rights of adult children. I read about financial independence, about breaking free from toxic family dynamics, about healing both physically and emotionally. As the house grew quiet and everyone else slept peacefully, I stayed awake planning my escape. Over the next 2 days, my physical condition deteriorated. The pain in my side became more intense, and the bruising spread, turning a deep purple-black with yellowish edges. Each breath was a struggle, and sleep was nearly impossible. I developed a constant dull headache from the combination of pain, stress, and the prescription medication I was rationing carefully. Despite my worsening condition, life in the house continued as if nothing had happened. My parents and Brooke went about their normal routines, preparing for her law school journey, discussing the celebration dinner that had been such a success, and making plans for the future. A future that in their minds still included me, as the compliant, invisible daughter who would continue to accept their treatment indefinitely. On the 3rd day after the injury, my parents and Brooke left for dinner at an expensive restaurant to meet with a family friend who was a partner at a prestigious law firm. Networking for Brooke's future, my mother explained as they headed out the door, not even asking if I wanted to join them or needed anything before they left. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I called an Uber. I had been researching urgent care centers and had found one about 15 minutes away that was open late. I carefully put on loose clothing that would not press against my injury, took my insurance card and ID, and waited by the window for my ride. The urgent care was quiet when I arrived. The receptionist took my information, and I waited only about 10 minutes before being called back to an examination room. The doctor, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, entered shortly after. "What brings you in today?" she asked, looking up from my intake form. "I think I have a broken rib," I said, my voice small. "It happened 3 days ago." Her eyebrows shot up. 3 days. Why did you wait so long to seek treatment? I had prepared for this question. I thought it would get better on its own, I said, avoiding her eyes, but the pain has gotten worse. She nodded, though I could tell she was not entirely convinced. "Can you show me where the injury is?" I carefully lifted my shirt to reveal the extensive bruising across my right side. She inhaled sharply at the sight. "That is significant bruising," she said, her voice carefully professional. "How did this happen?" Another question I had anticipated. "I was moving furniture in my room and fell against the corner of a wooden chest," I said, the lie burning my throat even as I told it. The doctor's expression remained neutral, but her eyes reflected doubt. "That must have been quite a fall," she commented. "I am going to need to examine the area. This will be uncomfortable, but I will be as gentle as possible." Her examination was indeed painful, but her touch was careful and professional. After checking the injury from various angles and listening to my breathing, she stepped back. "We need to get an X-ray," she said. "From the location and severity of the bruising as well as your pain level, I strongly suspect a fracture." The X-ray confirmed her suspicion, a clean break of my 7th rib. The doctor showed me the image, pointing to the clear line that indicated where the bone had cracked. "Fortunately, it is a clean break without displacement," she explained. "That means the bone ends are still aligned, which is good news for healing. However, I am concerned about the delay in treatment and the severity of the impact that caused this." She sat down on a stool and looked at me directly. "Amanda, I need to ask you something, and I would appreciate your honesty. Did someone do this to you?" I froze the truth on the tip of my tongue. For a moment, I considered telling her everything about Brooke's violence, about my parents' dismissal of my injury, about the years of abuse I had endured. But then I remembered my father's threat about my health insurance and student loans. "No," I said, looking away. "It was an accident. I told you I fell." She was silent for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a card. "This is information about resources for people experiencing domestic violence or abuse," she said quietly, pressing it into my hand. "Just in case you or someone you know might need it." I took the card wordlessly and slipped it into my pocket. She proceeded to give me instructions for recovery rest ice, over-the-counter pain medication, and breathing exercises to prevent pneumonia. "Unfortunately, there is not much we can do to treat broken ribs directly," she explained. "They need to heal on their own, which usually takes 6 to 8 weeks. The important thing is to manage pain and prevent complications." Before I left, she added, "If the pain worsens significantly, if you have trouble breathing, or if you develop a fever, go to the emergency room immediately. Those could be signs of complications like a punctured lung or infection." The Uber ride back to my house was excruciating, every bump in the road sending fresh waves of pain through my body. But I had what I needed: confirmation of my injury, proper medical advice, and most importantly, documentation. I had asked for and received a copy of my medical records, including the X-ray showing my broken rib. When I arrived home, the house was still empty. I made my way to my room and carefully hid the medical documents in a folder between art portfolios where no one would think to look. Then I took the pain medication the doctor had prescribed and lay down exhausted from the effort and stress. I must have fallen asleep because I woke to the sound of the front door opening and voices downstairs. Checking the time, I realized I had been asleep for nearly 3 hours. It was now past 11 at night, and my family had just returned from their dinner and whatever activities had followed. No one came to check on me. No one called up to see if I needed anything. They had been gone for nearly 6 hours, and not once had anyone texted or called to make sure I was okay. It was as if I had ceased to exist in their world. The next morning, I was sitting at my desk, carefully sorting through my belongings and making mental notes of what was truly important to take with me when I left, when Brooke appeared in my doorway. "Can I borrow your laptop?" she asked casually, as if she had not broken my rib 4 days ago. "Mine is updating." I stared at her in disbelief. After everything that had happened, she was standing in my doorway asking to borrow my computer as if nothing had changed between us. "No," I said simply. She blinked, surprised by the directness of my refusal. "Come on, Amanda, do not be petty. I just need it for an hour." "I said no," I repeated, turning back to what I was doing. Brooke stomped off, and within minutes, my mother appeared at my door. "Amanda," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval, "your sister needs to look up some information for law school. Let her use your laptop." "I am using it," I said, not looking up. "You can take a break," she insisted. "Family shares with each other." I turned to face her slowly, the movement sending pain through my injured side. "Family also takes care of each other when they are hurt," I said quietly. "Family does not prevent injured members from getting medical help. Family does not threaten and manipulate." My mother's face hardened. "We have moved past that incident. I thought we agreed." "You agreed," I corrected her. "I never did." She left in a huff, muttering about my attitude problem and how I was making things difficult for everyone. I returned to my sorting, a strange calm settling over me despite the confrontation. Every interaction now only confirmed what I already knew: I needed to leave. That night alone in my room, the weight of everything crashed down on me at once. I sat on my bed, surrounded by childhood photos I had pulled from albums downstairs. Photos of family vacations where I stood slightly apart from the others. School events where my parents beamed at Brooke while I stood in the background. Birthday parties where Brooke was always the center of attention, even when it was my birthday being celebrated. The pattern had always been there. I had never been a full member of this family, never been valued or protected or loved the way Brooke was. I had been an afterthought at best, a scapegoat at worst. Tears streamed down my face as I sobbed through the pain, both physical and emotional. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full magnitude of the betrayal, the years of neglect and dismissal, culminating in them choosing to protect my abuser rather than help me when I was injured. But as the tears finally subsided, something else took their place: resolve, a clarity I had never experienced before. I was not going to heal properly physically or emotionally until I removed myself from the source of injury. As long as I remained in this house with these people, I would continue to be hurt. That night, I stopped crying and started planning. Not vague ideas of escape, but concrete, actionable steps. I was 25 years old with a college degree and a job offer. I might be injured, but I was not helpless. I could save myself, even if no one else would. With my newfound clarity came a methodical approach to reclaiming my life. I was done being a victim of my family's dysfunction. I would become the architect of my own freedom. My first step was documentation. I carefully photographed my injury from multiple angles, making sure the extensive bruising was clearly visible. I organized my medical records from the urgent care visit, including the X-ray showing my broken rib and the doctor's notes documenting the injury. These went into a secure folder on my cloud storage, with copies also sent to my personal email. If my parents ever tried to deny what happened, I would have proof. Next, I reached out to Rachel, my closest friend from college, who had settled in Denver after graduation. We had stayed in touch, but I had always been careful not to burden her with the full truth about my family situation. Now, sitting in my car in a coffee shop parking lot far from my house, I finally told her everything. "I had no idea it was that bad," she said, horror in her voice. "Amanda, you cannot go back there." "I know," I replied, "but I need some time to get everything in order. Could I possibly stay with you for a few weeks until I find my own place?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. "My spare room is yours for as long as you need it. When are you coming?" "Soon," I promised. "I just need to handle a few things first." With accommodations secured, I turned my attention to financial independence. I called the graphic design firm that had offered me the job and accepted their offer, explaining that I had a medical issue that would require me to work remotely for the first month. They were understanding and agreed to the arrangement. I opened a new bank account at a different bank than the one my parents used. I had a small savings account that I had maintained throughout college, carefully setting aside money from part-time jobs and freelance design work. It was not much, but it would be enough to get me started. I transferred the entire amount to my new account, making sure to change all my banking passwords and remove my parents as authorized users on any of my accounts. Next came the painful process of deciding what to take and what to leave behind. I cataloged my most essential belongings: clothes, personal documents, my laptop and design equipment, and sentimental items that could not be replaced. Everything else I would leave. Material possessions could be rebought, but my safety and sanity were priceless. I worked out a detailed moving plan with Rachel and 2 other friends who lived in the area. We would wait until my family was out of the house, then move my essential belongings as quickly and efficiently as possible. I created a floor plan of my room with labeled areas indicating what needed to be packed and what could be left behind. As the day of my departure approached, I maintained a careful facade of normalcy. I joined family meals when required, kept conversations brief but civil, and gave no indication of my imminent departure. I avoided further confrontations with Brooke, staying out of her way as much as possible while my ribs slowly began to heal. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My parents announced that they would be taking Brooke to meet with the dean of her law school, a 5-hour drive, each way that would require an overnight stay. They would leave on Thursday morning and return Friday evening. "Will you be okay on your own?" my mother asked, more out of obligation than genuine concern. "I will be fine," I assured her, fighting to keep the relief from my voice. "You 3 enjoy your trip." The moment their car disappeared down the street on Thursday morning, I sprang into action. I texted Rachel. "They are gone. We are clear to move." Within an hour, Rachel and our friends arrived with Rachel's SUV and another friend's pickup truck. With 4 of us working together, we were able to pack and load my essential belongings in just under 3 hours. My rib protested with every movement, but the promise of freedom pushed me through the pain. As Rachel and our friends loaded the last few boxes into the vehicles, I stood in my bedroom one final time. The space looked strange with my personal touches, removed my artwork off the walls, my books gone from the shelves. It felt like a hotel room, impersonal and temporary, which I supposed was what it had always been, even if I had not recognized it. I placed a letter on my stripped bed. It was brief and factual, explaining that I was moving out and would contact them when I was ready. I did not mention the broken rib or their failure to help me. I did not express anger or blame. I simply stated that I needed space and time away from the family and that I would be safe but did not wish to be contacted. As I walked through the house one last time, memories flooded through me, both good and bad. Despite everything, there had been moments of joy in this house, moments when we had functioned as a normal family, at least on the surface. But those moments had always been fragile, always overshadowed by the underlying dynamics that had finally broken open like my rib. "Are you ready?" Rachel asked, gently standing by the front door. I took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pull in my side. "Yes," I said. "I am ready." The drive to Denver took just over an hour. Rachel and I followed behind our friends in the pickup truck, the highway stretching out before us like a promise. With each mile that passed, I felt the weight on my chest lightening, as if I could finally breathe properly for the first time in years despite my injured rib. Rachel's apartment was small but welcoming, with a spare room that she had prepared for me with fresh linens and a vase of flowers on the dresser. "Welcome home," she said as she helped me carry in the lightest of my belongings. "At least for now." That evening, as I was settling into the spare room, my phone began to ring. My parents had returned home early and found my letter. The barrage began, first calls, then texts when I did not answer. "What do you think you are doing?" My mother's first text read. "This is extremely immature behavior," came my father's message. Drama queen was all Brooke had to say. The messages grew increasingly manipulative as the evening wore on. "After all we have done for you," my mother wrote. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us from my father." "Mom is crying because of you," Brooke added, going for maximum guilt. I read each message feeling strangely detached. Their words no longer had the power to wound me. I sent a single reply to their group chat. "I am safe. I will contact you when I am ready. Please respect my decision." Then I silenced my phone and placed it in a drawer. For the first night, in as long as I could remember, I would sleep without fear of conflict, without bracing for the next attack, without making myself small to avoid notice. My first night in Rachel's spare room was a mixture of terror and freedom. Terror at having taken such a dramatic step, at having cut ties with my family, at facing an uncertain future. But also freedom, sweet and intoxicating, to be in a space where I was welcomed and valued, where no one would hurt me or dismiss my pain. I slept fitfully, my broken rib still causing discomfort in any position. But each time I woke, instead of the familiar dread that had been my constant companion in my parents' house, I felt a growing sense of peace. I had done it. I had saved myself. And while the road ahead would not be easy, it would be mine to walk as I chose. The first weeks of independence were harder than I had anticipated. My broken rib made physical tasks challenging, and the emotional adjustment was equally difficult. There were moments of doubt, of wondering if I had overreacted, of questioning whether I should have tried harder to make things work with my family. In those moments, I would look at the photos of my injury or reread the dismissive texts my parents had sent, and my resolve would strengthen again. Rachel was an incredible support, helping me with everything from setting up my remote workstation to accompanying me to follow-up medical appointments. She never made me feel like a burden, though I knew my presence disrupted her routine. "You would do the same for me," she said simply when I tried to thank her, and she was right. I would have. My new job began 2 weeks after I moved out. Working remotely was challenging, but also perfect for my situation. I could take breaks when the pain became too much, and I did not have to explain my injury to new colleagues. The work itself was engaging and rewarding, designing marketing materials for clients who actually appreciated my artistic skills. The physical healing of my rib progressed slowly but steadily. The sharp stabbing pain gradually gave way to a dull ache, then to occasional twinges when I moved too quickly or breathed too deeply. By the 6-week mark, I could sleep through the night without waking in pain, could laugh without clutching my side, could almost forget the injury until something reminded me. The emotional healing was more complicated. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and our weekly sessions became a lifeline as I processed not just the broken rib incident, but the years of subtle and not so subtle abuse that had preceded it. I learned about family dynamics, about golden children and scapegoats, about how patterns of behavior become entrenched over time. Most importantly, I learned that none of it had been my fault. "You did not cause their behavior," my therapist reminded me often. You could not control it and you could not cure it. The only thing you could control was your response to it. 3 months after moving out, I found my own apartment, a small but sunny one-bedroom in a neighborhood I loved. Rachel helped me move in, and together with a few other friends, we christened the space with takeout and wine. Looking around at these people who genuinely cared about me, who respected my boundaries and valued my presence, I realized I had created something my biological family had never given me: a chosen family built on mutual respect and genuine affection. As I settled into my new life, I began to consider whether and how to reconnect with my parents and Brooke. After much thought and discussion with my therapist, I decided to establish limited contact on my terms. 4 months after moving out, I sent them an email. "I am ready to begin communicating again," I wrote. "But things will be different. I will not be visiting the house for now. I am open to meeting in public places for short periods. I need acknowledgement of what happened and how it was handled. Most importantly, I need respect for my boundaries going forward." Their initial response was predictably defensive. My mother claimed I had abandoned the family. My father accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. Brooke remained largely silent, letting our parents fight her battle as usual. But surprisingly, after a few weeks of standoff, they agreed to meet me for lunch at a restaurant halfway between our homes. The meeting was tense and awkward, with carefully polite conversation about neutral topics. No one mentioned the broken rib or my departure. It was as if they had collectively decided that if they did not acknowledge what had happened, it would cease to exist. I left that lunch feeling disappointed but also strangely empowered. I had faced them on my terms, maintained my boundaries, and walked away intact. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Over the following months, I established a pattern of occasional brief contact: a phone call every few weeks, a lunch every couple of months. Always in public, always with clear start and end times, always with the understanding that I would leave if boundaries were crossed. My parents gradually adjusted to this new reality, though they never fully acknowledged their role in what had happened. My mother occasionally made comments about how I had always been so sensitive. My father sometimes referred to my dramatic exit. But they no longer had the power to hurt me with these dismissals. I could see them for what they were: attempts to maintain their narrative, rather than face the painful truth. Brooke remained the most resistant to change. She never apologized for breaking my rib, never acknowledged any wrongdoing. When we were forced to interact at family lunches, she was coldly polite, treating me like an acquaintance rather than a sister. In some ways, this was a relief. The pretense of sisterly affection had always been more painful than honest distance. 6 months after moving out, I received a promotion at work. My designs had impressed several key clients, and my boss recognized my talent with increased responsibility and a significant raise. I celebrated with my friends, took myself on a weekend getaway to a mountain cabin, and felt a deep sense of validation that had nothing to do with my family's approval. Around the same time, I began dating Michael, a kind and thoughtful man I met through a work project. Our relationship developed slowly and respectfully, with clear communication and mutual support. The contrast between how he treated me and how my family had treated me was striking and healing in its own way. "You flinch sometimes when people move too quickly near you," he observed, once his voice gentle. "Did someone hurt you?" I surprised myself by telling him the whole story, expecting him to be horrified or to see me differently afterward. Instead, he listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and then simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." They missed out on knowing an amazing woman. 1 year after the day my rib was broken, I stood in my apartment, looking at myself in the mirror. Physically, there was no trace of the injury. The bruises had long since faded, the bone had knit itself back together, the pain had subsided. But the experience had left its mark in other ways, invisible but permanent. I was stronger now, more confident in my boundaries, more aware of my worth. I had built a life that reflected my values rather than my family's expectations. I had a fulfilling career that valued my creativity, a relationship based on mutual respect, and friendships that nourished rather than depleted me. The broken rib had been painful, traumatic, and frightening, but it had also been the catalyst for my transformation, the crack that let the light in. Without that injury, I might have continued to accept treatment that diminished me, might have spent years or even decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Family is not just blood, I had learned. It is how people treat you. It is respect for your boundaries, concern for your well-being, celebration of your successes. It is standing beside you when you are hurting, not dismissing your pain or prioritizing appearances. Standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Setting boundaries is not cruel, it is an act of self-preservation. Walking away from people who hurt you, even if they are family, is sometimes the strongest and healthiest choice you can make. My broken rib had healed stronger than before, and so had I. The fracture line would always be visible on an X-ray, a reminder of what had happened. But bones that break and heal properly are often stronger at the point of the break than they were before. The same I discovered is true of the human spirit. If you are in a similar situation, know that you deserve to be safe, respected, and loved. The path to healing may not be easy, but it is worth taking. Sometimes the family we choose is more nurturing than the family we are born into. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest growth. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself, even from people who should have loved you? Let me know in the comments below. Your story matters, and it might help someone else find the courage to make a change. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. And share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you are stronger than you know.